Hi everyone and welcome to a new tutorial. My name is Abdi for asART 3D and motion graphics. In this tutorial I would like to share two new macros for RailClone with you. And for those who are new to RailClone maybe and don't know what that is, you can go and download the free version on i2soft.com. Just go to the i2soft.com webpage and then navigate to Product RailClone. There you see download now. Click on that and that will bring you down to the download section where you see the free version and the pro version. And the free version is actually the version we're going to use today, and that is good enough to follow along with this tutorial. The main difference between those is that the free version is supporting one so-called generator per RailClone object, and also it supports 3 segments only, where the RailClone Pro is unlimited in those things. If you want to know more about the differences and the comparison between those, you can go to this web page and read all about the fine differences between those versions. And you're going to find all the links in the description below of this video. After installing the RailClone, you also need these two macros that I'm giving away. Just go to the Google Drive. You're going to find the link in the description and then download these two and save them somewhere on your local hard drive. After installing RailClone, we can just jump into 3ds Max, and there you're going to see that little icon up here in this bar, which is RC, short for RailClone. And if you don't see that, you can just navigate to your create stack and then go to geometry, and here you can go and navigate to i2 software where you see your RailClone button. Then select it, click and drag in your viewport, and it will create the RailClone object for you. Now, in order to import those macros that you have downloaded, just go to the modifier stack, find this style rollout, and there you're going to see this little button which is called Open Style Editor, and that will open this guy for you. Then here we have all the things: generators, objects, parameters, and everything that will give you all the tools you need to start from the scratch and do your setup. But we are not going to do this. We are navigating down here to macros and change from library to users macros. Your list may be just blank, and you can right click here, go to add category, name the category as you wish, and then click on OK. So that will give you the name of your category just in this list. Now select your category and right click on this, go to import macro, and this will ask you for the location of the macros you have saved on your hard drive. Just go and find them, install or actually import them one by one, and after importing them you have these two macros ready to go. One is the asART Assembler Lite 2.0 and the other one is asART FlexGen Lite. So the Lite indicates actually that both of them are working with the Lite version of RailClone as well. So we can start to take a look at this assembler macro and see what that does. So when we drag and drop it here into our list, we see that it is asking for 4 inputs, and it gives us some properties and parameters to work with. So now let's go and start to see what these things actually are that is asking for. The first thing is just a spline. So let me close that real quick and then go and create a spline here, just something like this, and then bring it to the center. Now the next thing it is asking for all these 3 segments, and the way that assembler macro works is this way. It is going to take these 3 segments, so which is the start segments, that will be the bottom of whatever model you have, and then we have the default segment. This segment is the segment which is getting stretched and scaled and deformed actually. And the end segment is our very top segment that is sitting on top of the default depending on its height, and it moves with it. So this is actually the main function of this Assembler Lite. So you can set something together or assemble something together out of 3 parts, and the default part will get deformed and you can change the height of the model. But let us go and just use this to assemble the whole thing using the Assembler Lite macro and see what we get. So let's go and select that again, and let me just rename it to rc.stools so we know which one is which. We're gonna need more than one. So then open the editor. Now I'm gonna drag out the spline input, and that is asking me to create a spline object. I'm gonna do this and then go and select my spline here. And for these 3 segments, I can just go and select them in my viewport. So the start, the default, and the end segment. Then right click here my editor and import them from the scene. So again, if you right click, go down here, import scene selection 3 objects is what you have to click on, and it will import all the objects you have selected. So now we can go and link them. Default goes to default, the end segment goes to the end, and the start segment gets linked to the start input. So now that will just create all the stools and distribute them along that path. Let me get rid of the original segments and we can see what we have here. So now let me go and extend these spline so we have something interesting to work with instead of just having one single line going on. So I'm going to drag it and it will now distribute it all along the path automatically for me, no matter what shape I have. So let me just make more room here. Something like this. So now back to our editor and let's see what we can do with it. Here when we select this guy, we have distance. So the more distance, the less stools we will get. And if you decrease the distance, it will just give you more stools. So that is one thing we can do. Then we have the possibility to offset them. So we can set them back or bring him forward, so just the other way around. We can offset the z-axis if needed. And we can actually go and set different heights for different stools here. So just a random height. You can change the height. If you set the height to 0, it will just go and use the original size that we have for our segment. And if you want to change it, you can just drag it down to maybe 10 centimeters here, like this, and then move to whatever value you want to have. Just keep in mind this value is changing the default segment only. So it is not the entire height of the stool, it is just the entire height of the middle segment in this case, so the default segment. So this is where you can just go and adjust its height. Now let's set that back to 0. Now we can go and activate the randomness and set that maybe to 30 and here the max to 60 and then set the correction to 0, and that will give you different heights for different stools. So if you go and change the seat here, you're going to see that it will change the arrangement of them, and you can change it if needed. Sometimes you need to do so and sometimes not, so you have here the possibility to do that if you have to do this for your project. Then we have the rotation. We can set it to any value you want. We can also go and rotate it on the y-axis, which is not making too much sense here right now, but we will have examples where that will be handy. We have the randomness of the Z rotation as well, so we can set the minimum maybe to 0 and the maximum to 359, and that will give you the stools in different directions. Here you can just add some values or subtract, or just for some corrections if needed. And here we have the seat again. So change the arrangement of your setup. Now let's go back and zero all that out and get rid of the randoms. Then we can flip them. And the reason why they are changing to a darker color right now is because of the display settings. So when I select the RailClone and then go to display, here you see I've set it to quick mesh, which is memory saving. When I go to mesh, it will just show me the entire mesh again without those darker colors, but it will use more memory. So I go and switch it back to quick mesh, and that will not affect your renders or something. It is just in the viewport that is going a bit darker. So let's go back here and then unflip it again. We can mirror them, so we have the same thing in front of it, but now they are sitting on top of each other. And that is what we can change the y-axis to 45 or something, or 50, and then they are now opposite of each other. We do have these feeler radius, and that will just go and round our corners here. So right now we have a sharp corner. It will not change the spline, but it will just mimic actually another spline and then round the values for it. So when I go and set that to 100, let's say, you see that it's making a curve. It's much smoother than having just set it on 0 or something. So let's go back to 0 for now, then back to our perspective view. And we do have these padding for the start and the end of the spline, and we can also remove the end and start segments entirely. So let me show you later on where these two values can come in handy. But for now, this is what you can do. So we can distribute more or less of these stools along the path. We can change the height. We can set the height to a random value if you want to. So then we can change its randomness here. So let's go to 5 and maybe that -5. And then change the arrangement a little bit so they're not all sitting straight, and so on. So these are the things we can do with chair segments or these stool segments. So that is the Assembler Lite. Now let me show you what the other macro is doing, which is called FlexGen. So I'm going to create another RailClone object in my scene, and then go to the editor, and now drag the FlexGen into my editor. Here again, it will ask for a spline, so I'm going to use the same spline here. And now let me explain to you how this macro works so we can take it from there. So the FlexGen will use 3 segments, which is the end and start segment, the default segment, and the so-called evenly segment. So you see the start and end here is red, the default is the green one, and the blue ones are the evenly segments. So it will allow you to stretch stuff like this. So if you have a table, it will just stretch it in its length. You can't change the height of it here with this macro. That would require the use of the Pro version if you want to go further into all these settings and all the features you can tweak and so on. But for the free version, this is how far we can take it with that macro. So it will stretch your table or whatever you have as a model that can be stretched in its length, and it will attach these end and start segments at the end and start of this default segment depending on its length where it is, and it will also distribute these legs evenly all along the path. So we're gonna use now these segments and create the table along the existing path that we have, so you can see what that is doing. Now let me go and call this rc.table, so you're not messing up things here. Then open up the editor, and all I need here is one segment only for each function. So I need this start and end segment, I need the default segment, I need one evenly segment. So I'm going to select 3 objects. In my editor again, right click, import scene selection, 3 objects. That will drop them in here. And now we can go and link them to their corresponding input. So default goes to default, end and start will go to the end and start settings, input, sorry, and then evenly goes to the segment evenly input. Now let me go and hide these again. And here we have our table created along the same path. So now as you can see, here we have our stools going into that leg of the table, and this is where those padding settings are coming in handy. So when I open the editor for my stools again, here you see that on top here, the name. So I can go to the start paddings, set that maybe to 20 and end to 20 as well. So that will push him in, so from both sides, and they are not going into my leg. So now that height is a little bit too high for some of them. Here is where we can go to these height correction settings. Maybe set it here so I can see all of them, and then start to drag them down so it will make more sense. But actually, I'm going to get rid of that randomness for now. So that is our setup. So now I will go and open my editor for the table, and then go down to my feeder radius and set that maybe to 90. That should round my corners here. And as you can see, that will mess up some of stuff here. It will give me a gap and so on. We can fix it by going to the style rollout of the RailClone object, and then increase the curve steps maybe to 50, and that should fix that. If there is a gap still between them, open the editor, click on the macro, and then go use padding, turn that on, and drag that back to -1 or something, so it will close this gap. And here is how we have a nice smooth curve going on instead of those sharp things. Now we have to go back to our stools. So select the stools, click on the open editor, so it will change it to the stools editor here. And now select the macro again, go down and set the feeder radius here to 90 as well. So we have the same for both of them. Now here we have maybe way too many stools. Let me set that to 150 or something, or 180. We don't have so many. Okay. Now we can use these macros for other things as well. So let me just create another spline. Let me just do a rectangle. And then set that right in the center. And then create another RailClone object. Open this, go to the editor, and drag here my FlexGen macro again. So create another spline object, select now this rectangle. And now here I do have another wall segment, which is just a box. This is that guy. Just a box with some 6 segments on it. That is actually all. I'm going to use this as my wall segment. So I'm going to import it into my editor and then set this just to default. And this will create this wall for me. And here see we have a gap. So I can go to my padding here and then change that to -7 or something. And here maybe the same thing, or maybe -10. And that should fix it. You can also go and change the feeder radius for this guy as well, so you can bring that up so you have rounded corners, and that way we can create a wall around our stuff, so we have a room. Here we have something called limit by ID, and that is pretty handy when you have a spline like this. And then let's go to edit spline and just divide that into 3 different segments. And now select this segment, this front segment only, and set its ID to number 2. Okay, so the rest of it will have number 1, as you can see here, but this segment of our spline gets ID number 2. So we go back to the wall settings, and here in that editor, when I now go and say limit it to an ID, it will just go and distribute the wall segments on that ID only. So when I change it to 2, it will just use that segment. When I go to 1, it will use it for the rest, which is a cool thing if you want to have just a gap somewhere quickly and then set a door or something here. You can also go and tweak this. You can also go and actually move that like that, you know, and change it the way you want it. So this is the function of limit by ID. So we have been using the same macro to create these walls. Now we can select that guy now, our wall segment. I'm going to copy this and then solo that. Set it back to 0 here maybe, and then edit poly. Before I do edit poly, I can actually go and set the width to 5. And here we don't need 6 segments, we maybe need 1 or 2 segments here. And let me go make that maybe 2 centimeters thick. and then use the edit poly to give it some other loops. So let me grab this guy, then push that up. And select these segments, push them forward a little bit, like this. Then go and use weld target. And link these together, weld them together. So we go to another edit poly, select that top part, then go to chamfer, then chamfer it down with a couple segments here. So let me add another loop, go to 245, and here I'm gonna delete this guy and push those forward. Well, actually gonna just push this guy like that, and then go and target weld that back to these vertices. So I'm gonna go and select the bottom part here, go to detach and call that segment panel start. Make sure it is not as a clone or something. Then I'm going to select these segments here, detach those as well, call it segment panel default. This is the segment that is gets stretched and everything, and that left over here is our segment panel end. So now what I have to do, which is pretty important, is make sure that all the anchor points are set to the very bottom of each segment. So I'm going to select the very end, so actually the very bottom edge here, so I can see how far it is. It is 245, so I can go to my hierarchy, effect pivot only, and bring that up to 245. Make sure you don't change X and Y axis. The same goes for this guy, so I'm going to select my default segment here, go to my edit poly, select my edge tool, and then down here we will see that is 62.5. So I'm going to copy this value, go to hierarchy, effect pivot, and then set it back to 62.5, so we'll bring it up there. If you don't do that, it will fail. So just make sure you really take care of those positioning of the anchor points, otherwise it will not work the way it should, and you're gonna end up with just some funny results. So that is what we get now. Now let me create another RailClone object. Then open the editor and use the assembler again. So I'm going to drag out the spline and then select all of these segments that I've created. Right click, import scene selection, and that will drop them in here. So let me go and set that to default. That goes to the start and that goes to the end segment. So I can go and remove this or hide them, and then unhide everything else. Go to my spline, select the same spline here, and now decrease the distance 6.5, maybe 6.5. So Now I'm gonna, sorry, I'm gonna not use that spline. I'm gonna use the same spline for as we have for the wall, so which is the rectangle here. There we go. See, we had feeder radius of 80 or something, and now we have to bring it in. So we fix that issue. As you can see, that is pretty edgy. So we have to go back to the RailClone settings here, and then in the style rollout, set that guy to 50, and that should take care of that edge. And if not, let's go back here and see if we can get rid of this, and that will fix it. So now back to the panels. Open that. Let's see. Let me go back here again and see what actually was the value. Let me set that to 90. So we have the same value for both. So we don't have to do gas work. So it is 90 as well. Now let's see. We push them back. So just like that. Now we have those panels on top of our wall here. And now I can go back to my editor and set the height to random. Set that maybe to 60 and the maximum to 90. Then change this guy to 0. And that will give you some decoration on your wall, for example. So we can move that up. Something like that. So maybe 160 or so. And here we go to 90. So we can change the cladding if you wish. And here again, we can go and then change the limitation for the spline. We can go to the editor and then limit by ID, activate this, and it will just go and use the spline number 1 or whatever we set there as an ID, and will not close this gap for us. So let me go and move that closer a little bit. I guess we can bring these guys a little bit closer to each other. So go here. Something like that will do the job. So you get the idea. So that is what we can do with the walls. So now let's say we would like to have some lights on top of our table. So for this, I'm going to go and just for a second hide everything. Oh, you know what? I'm going to just hide it like this. And then go to the Cosmos library, go to 3D models, lighting, and then go and find the light that we can use here in our example. Let me go and select this guy. Then import as mesh, delete the proxy. Let me go to the front view, and first of all, we have to turn that upside down. So it is going this way. Then I'm gonna go and go to utilities, reset X form, reset selected. Then edit poly, right click, collapse to. Yes. So check my hierarchy, everything is fine. Now we can go and deselect stuff from here. So I'm going to select this part and then deselect that. Go and detach this and call that light start. Then I'm going to detach this guy, which is just the wire, and then detach light default. Make sure he's not a clone or something. And then the left over here will be our light end. So now I have to fix the anchor point. So actually each pivot point should be on the very bottom of each segment. So let me go and see where that thing is. So let me select this guy, and that is 2.133. I'm gonna just copy that, go to hierarchy, affect pivot only, and change this value to 2.133 as we have it here. Make sure you don't change X and Y values here. For our head or the end part, actually the pivot should be a little bit inside of it. That is where the wire ends. But we can go something like here. That should actually do the job. So we could go up here, but I'm going to just put it like there. Again, don't change X and Y. And this guy is on the very bottom. So now we have our 3 segments that we need. We can go back here, show our spline, create a new RailClone object, open the editor, and now I'm going to drag my Assembler Lite again, drag out the spline, then go and select all of these parts I created. So the start, default, and the end part. Right click, import scene selection. Now go and link them together. So that goes to start, and that goes to the end. There we have it. Now I can go and move these guys to a new layer and hide them. So, and let's go and select the spline, and that will go and distribute all the lights along that spline for me. So now we can go to the settings and change the rotation on the y-axis to 180, so they are facing the other way around, and set the z offset to 250, and that is actually, as far as I can remember, the height of our wall segment. So yeah, now we have these lights here. Now we can go and set the height of them to random, set the correction to 0, bring the randomness to maybe 30, and then 60. Then we can change here the arrangement. So you can actually make it longer if you wish, 60 and then 90 or something. So, and then change the arrangement if you want. We can go and select our table, go back to the editor and see what is the fillet amount. It is 90. So we're going to go select our lights again, go back to its editor and set that fillet radius to 90 as well. So it will follow the same path as our table. There we have it. Now that setup is actually done so far. And if you go and change anything here, it will just change it for you with all the settings that you have. So we can make a longer room here. We can go and select this spline down there, add another editable spline on top of it, then drag this point out maybe to here, we can actually go and say it should break this connection, and by doing so we have now two different splines that we can work with. So it's one thing, and then I can move that back to this side, etc. And everything will just get arranged and created for you. You can always go back to the settings, click that guy, and make sure you don't have so many legs under that table maybe, and change it to your needs and wishes. You can also change the stools, of course, to something better than we have right now. You can go to the furniture, chair. Let me find something. Let's go with this guy. Import that into my scene. Now let me go and unhide it so we can see where that is. So solo that. I'm gonna import it as a mesh. So in here I can go to edit poly, collapse to yes, go to the front view. Now I'm going to select this guy right in the middle, just that cylinder, and then detach, call that chair default. Again, make sure it is not detached as a copy or something, and then go and select the entire bottom part here and detach this again as chair.start. Okay, and this guy we're gonna name it chair end. So again, go and make sure that all the pivot points are at the right place here. This guy, let's go up to this point, and that is on the very bottom. So this is in the very bottom, that is in the very bottom for the cylinder and for the start segment as well. Now we go and select this stool setting or setup, go back, delete all these parts from the old stool, and now select all these three new parts we created, right click, import, and then again link them together. So go on end and the start. So there we go. Now we can go and rename that chair segments. Get rid of it. And there we have our chairs. Now we have to tweak stuff, of course. The settings don't match anymore, so we can bring it back a little bit. Just too close to that thing. So let me set it to maybe 65 even. And here we have to bring them in even more, so about 30 and 30. Maybe even 35. 35, so it is not running into that leg. And there you have it. Now here again, if you want to, you can change the height of them. You can set the height differently. Right now we have slightly a difference in their z-axis rotation and so on. So this is actually how you can use these macros to quickly create a scene like this. It could be exterior, it could be interior scene, it could be anything that you can stretch in its length and in its height. So you can easily create stuff like this in an acceptable amount of time and with really not much effort, I would say. So I hope that this tutorial and these macros are helpful and useful to you guys. Wishing you a great and successful time, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.